Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
Plans for the offshore wind project along the Ocean City coastline are moving ahead with expected legal action from the resort to halt those plans. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. We turn to Delmarva Public Media's Brian Shane to talk about the latest developments and other news from the resort. So, Brian, first of all, welcome to the program.
Hey, Don, thanks for having me.
So what do we know about this project? It sounds as if it's moving along, but the Ocean City wants to file a lawsuit, but what can it do?
So, Don, the current project as it stands, just last week, September the 5th, the federal government announced that the offshore wind project was going to be moving forward. This is a plan that's supposed to generate enough power to supply more than 700,000 homes on the East Coast. And this includes installation of 114 turbines, approximately 10 miles off the coast. Some of these turbines would be more than 900 feet tall. And the town of Ocean City is completely opposed to this. The mayor of Ocean City, Rick Mean, who I talked to about this, he's described it as a David and Goliath fight. The campaign is to save our sunrise. So as we know right now, the town will be meeting with their attorneys to discuss moving forward. The mayor has said, the last thing they want to do to go to court, but they're going to do it if necessary to make sure that project can be slowed down, stalled, prevented.
In terms of a lawsuit, what kind of grounds would they have?
That's a great question, and that's something that we haven't heard the specifics of from resort officials. As the project was developed and announced in the last several years, there was a term that came up called delay and pray. And the idea is that they can file a lawsuit to slow things down and hope that there's some measure of success. Now, I can tell you that the town has hired for this lawsuit. This is according to the mayor. They've hired a law firm that has been successful up in New Jersey. There was a town that did file a lawsuit to oppose their offshore wind, and ultimately that project went down. And the town of Ocean City seems to think that by hiring the same attorneys that successfully litigated a windshore project, that their chances are going to be pretty good as well.
So I understand, by the way, finally, that the resort would like to see this thing, if it were built, to be further out east. But I understand that that's not really in the offing as far as what the company says.
That's correct. The lease area that the federal government has granted to the wind farm developer is 10.7 miles offshore. And if you go further away from that, further east, then you're getting into some shipping lanes, and that's where there's been some hiccups. But I can tell you something else here, Don. The agency that's overseeing this is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM for short. They're actually going to give us some new plans. Coming up on September the 24th, there's going to be another public meeting hosted by BOEM where they're going to be presenting plans for a different project where, and this is according to the town, some of these turbines could be as close as 3.5 miles from the shoreline. And this is in addition to the one we're already talking about that's 10.7 miles out. So this is brand new information, and the town is saying that this will have a devastating effect on the viewshed, on tourism, on property values, and that it would industrialize the view, and that's a word that the mayor has used.
So I want to turn now to Ocean City and its struggle with the short-term rentals. They're trying to sort of clamp down in terms of how long people stay. What's the situation at this point?
The town has seen explosive growth in the last decade with the Airbnb industry. That's companies like VRBO, Airbnb, Vacasa, where people can rent out their own properties. And this is a way of sort of circumventing the very traditional hotel industry. There are approximately 9,000 rental properties that are licensed in the town of Ocean City. So what the town wants to do is sort of tighten the screws on what you can do with your rental property. And the proposal was to actually create regulations that would clamp down on minimum length of stay and occupancy. And so based on the pipeline of current and proposed projects, the town thinks that when we're done with those projects, we're going to see an increasing number of short-term rentals. So here's what they're talking about. A minimum length of stay, as proposed, would be saying that your minimum stay would have to be between 5 and 7 days in one of these rentals. So no more short-term, no more 1, 2, 3-day rentals in something like an Airbnb by law, by policy. And the other change might be to occupancy, where the proposal would be saying we can't have more than 4 related persons in a dwelling. The town has come out and said that when it comes to occupancy, it's basically impossible to enforce. Now, here's the other thing, Don. As the town has discussed this, one of the members of the council, her name's Carol Proctor, she has said, hold up, when you talk about restricting occupancy in the single-family home rental units, you're talking about families. Maybe we don't need to put a restriction on that. So at this time, the city council has remanded the discussion to another body, the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the continuing discussion is going to be moving forward in the weeks to come. But right now, the town broadly is saying we want to clamp down on how many people can stay and for how long they can stay in a rental property.
So also, by the way, speaking of places to stay, the manufactured homes, there's an insurance issue here. Difficulty finding insurance carriers, especially for homes that are, say, over 20 years old. What's the situation with that? And is there really anything the resort can do about it?
That's a great point. The big picture is that the town can do nothing with this. Here is what's happening. It started with some notifications from people who have homes in the Montego Bay community of Ocean City. If you're familiar with the town's layout, that's about 128th Street up to 135th Street on the Bay side. Montego Bay is the largest residential community, about 1,500 residents. Montego Bay goes back to when men walked on the moon. It was actually developed in 1969 as a mobile home park. And back then, you could actually buy a house for about $5,000. People have owned here for decades. You've got several hundred year-round Ocean City residents who make their home in Ocean City. Here's the issue. We're hearing in recent weeks from residents and realtors that property insurance carriers, the people you go to buy your homeowner's policy, are turning people down. They're declining to provide policies on, you said it, manufactured homes that are 20 years or older. So we're talking about declined policies for single-wide and double-wide trailers, and those still account for more than half of the Montego Bay neighborhood. So the issue is that anybody who wants to buy one of those types of homes is going to have to pay in cash because the bank won't let you get a mortgage. And because of the insurance stipulation. So as you mentioned, there's nothing the town can really do. It's out of their hands. So now elected officials in Ocean City are going to pass this along to our representatives in Annapolis and see if the General Assembly can do something to take action. But this is a big deal. I can't imagine what it's like for people who all of a sudden don't have homeowners insurance and can do nothing about it. Your hands are tied.
Is there a sense that they may look at the state to try to kind of provide some kind of insurance? I mean, I guess that's the only option I think that might be out there.
That's a great question. What the state of Maryland can do to fix the situation is going to come down to a matter of policy and possibly having to amend or create new laws to fix the situation. That would be my guess.
So finally, we got Oceans Calling, the music festival that's coming up in about a week. What do we expect? What are the acts there? And what do we expect in terms of the crowds?
Yeah, this is a very, very big deal for Ocean City. Oceans Calling is coming back for its second year, as you mentioned, in 2 weeks. It's a 3-day festival that starts on Friday, September the 27th. Last year, we saw about 50,000 people in town. And before the show, the town said, hey, we're looking at an economic impact of about $30 million. But guess what? After the fact, the real number after the show was closer to $60 million in economic impact for the resort. So if the weather holds, I think that's likely to happen again. Oceans Calling. You may recall that last year's show was actually kind of a redo. The inaugural event in 2022 had to be canceled because of hurricane conditions. So we're back again for the second track. This year we've got headlining acts that include Blink-182, The Killers, and Dave Matthews Band. And these are groups, Don, you may remember, that have been around now for 25 or 30 years. So the show organizers are definitely targeting an audience of elder millennials and Gen X who grew up in the 90s with these bands. And they also probably have the disposable income to attend the show. It's going to cost you more than $300 for a 3-day general admission ticket. And the show sold out about a week after tickets went on sale. But, Don, if you want to go, you can still get tickets. The resale market is pretty active right now online.
In terms, by the way, of the resort, how do they handle such an influx of people? I mean, obviously they do it during the tourist season, as it were, but that still sounds pretty high.
It's a massive amount of people to drop into one. It's not just the town of Ocean City, but it's this one small downtown area. They've done something that is very clever and was very difficult to pull off. And that's the town and the concert promoters joined forces, and they've basically fenced in the entire downtown area. So the lower boardwalk becomes part of the festival grounds. You are no longer able to access it as a member of the public. You have to have a ticket. So everybody is sort of in one corralled area. The police presence is massively stepped up. The emergency responders are all on site. So the town has put in immense amounts of preparation. So, and last year, and last year's event reportedly went off just about perfectly without a hitch. Everybody said how well run the event went last year, so I think we're going to see a repeat of that. It's also worth mentioning as well that just 1 week after Ocean's Calling, the town is going to put on another concert on the same festival grounds. This one's being called Country Calling. You've got headliners like Eric Church, Lainey Wilson, Tyler Children, and Jelly Roll. This one is also sold out, and Country Calling, you're going to hit a whole other demographic of music fans, a little younger. But if you do like older country music, we're going to have people like Glenn Black and Dwight Yoakam and Martina McBride on the stage right on the shoreline in Ocean City for Country Calling.
We've been speaking with Delmarva Public Media's Brian Shane about the latest events in Ocean City. Appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us.
Thanks, Don.
You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
The Maryland Folk Festival is just around the corner, and there's a special place for poetry. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Nancy Mitchell is Salisbury's Poet Laureate, and she has overseen a stage that features a number of poets, including Maryland State Poet Laureate Grace Cavallari. But there's also another feature close to home for the Eastern Shore, a conversation between what are called the from heres and the come heres. Nancy, welcome to the program. So we have this narrative component of the Maryland Folk Festival. Describe for me overall the kind of things we might hear and the kind of purpose that it has.
Purpose is to talk about some of the things, particularly about poetry, why it's really a tool for us to transform experience and make it available to other people. It's kind of the Jungian theory of transformation, where when you create something out of an experience, it's out of your body, you have a distance from it, and you can look at it as a work of art. So we're having the first people coming are Sue Ellen Thompson and Beth Doolin, and they both have books out about transforming grief and trauma. So it says, give sorrow words. So they're going to read and talk about, answer questions about how this has been beneficial to them and how they think it helps the evolution of our culture.
So in terms of one of the things that I experience here is I grew up outside of the Eastern Shore. So there are these come here, from here issues, and you have a panel talking about that. In fact, you have Lex Lowe, who is a from here, and Lad Colston, who is a come here. What should we learn about that?
Well, I think what's fascinating about it is that really and truly all of us in the United States of America, in terms of when the United States of America became the United States of America, we're all come heres. And, but from heres are people who can claim that their family and descendants have been in this area for 2 or more generations. And what's interesting to me is that you have a come here who enters and has a different perspective of someone who grew up here and has this history. For example, there's one of my guests she is from here, and her family can claim that they were citizens of this part of this neck of the world, this side of the bridge since the 17th century. And her experience growing up in Salisbury was very, very different because there you could swim in the park, for one thing. You could swim in the ponds, and they could walk to the library, and they didn't have any of the things to worry. But they were the 1%. She was in the hunt club. Her father was a representative and served on the county council. And then my guess that is the come here has a whole different perspective. When he came into the Salisbury, the ponds were polluted. People couldn't swim in them. And I think and he perceived the come heres and from heres probably a little bit differently in terms of maybe how the communities that he found himself in, and they were a part of his profession and also a part of his civic duty that he feels that he has to the rest of the community. And his was a very different experience. So I thought it was interesting to hear them talk about it. And I'm really interested in the stereotypes about each and seeing if by talking with them we can unpack them and see if they really do apply and examine them. For example, the from here's are the stereotype is that they're resistant to change, they're provincial, and they're very protective of their culture. And they can see people that aren't from here as potentially dangerous and a threat to the status quo. And the come heres may feel that they have a little bit more sophistication than the folks in that they're of the place they're coming to, and maybe feel differently. Now, I think I should disclaim right here: I'm not talking about people who came here out of duress. I'm talking about people who chose to come here, and the from heres chose to stay here rather than being in a position where they could not afford to leave. So these are two people that had that agency to choose one way or the other. And I'm really curious why someone would choose to stay here. Well, it probably is obvious that all of their needs were being met and they had a sense of identity in place. But my other guest is a sixth generation from Washington, D.C., and he chose to come here. And it's almost like you enter with a completely fresh identity because as long as you're from here, you have that identity. But when you move somewhere else, you become a come here and you don't have that. So how much is the from here and come here? What does it have to do with temperament or character? And just wondering how close to truth are some of these stereotypes.
Well, it's one of the things that struck me, and I came here, originally from Los Angeles, is that there's a racial history to this peninsula, and particularly to Salisbury with obviously the last lynching in 1931 with Matthew Williams. How do you assess the difference in terms of viewing that incident as a come here as opposed to, say, a from here?
Well, I think for one thing, the from here's, my guess that is from here, the schools weren't integrated until her senior year. And the beaches she went to and the parks she went to and where they swam, they were segregated. So I think, and she was kind of at this upper crust, the 1% of families living in this area. There were lots of families that had none of those privileges. So I'm not even sure if it was a part of their consciousness. I don't know. And I think for someone who comes here with this history, this legacy, it has to be eye-opening. And one of the guests, the guest that was from Washington said that when he was growing up, you were warned not to stop on the Eastern Shore if you were traveling. So, that's kind of coming here probably a little warily, and from here maybe it's not even on the periphery of their consciousness. So I don't know, or it's something that there's shame around it and they don't want to face it, and there's generational guilt or generational entitlement. I'm not really sure, and I'm hoping we can talk about it because we're going to have to come together on this And, there's several examples going on downtown. The new library, the new Performing Arts Center, the hotel. The from here's really don't seem to want it too much. And the come here's look at it as great opportunity for economic and cultural development. And cities that are the most healthy are the cities that are really most culturally diverse. And that it breeds hybrid vigor. And there is a resistance to that. And there may be a sense that I think the come here vision may be unsustainable. And maybe the come here vision is a little bit more realistic in terms of what has to happen for Salisbury to grow. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, do you think that we're getting certainly a lot more people coming to the shore every day from outside?
Yes.
How do you see that then changing the social fabric of the Eastern Shore?
Well, I think it's changed a lot. And I think it could be, when we look at people that are coming in, we have a whole Haitian population. We have an Asian population. We have a Hindu population. And really, outside of events where people can come together, like the Holy Festival, which was terrific, people don't have opportunities to really intermingle where it really happens, and that's within your social circle and family, where those connections are really made. And I don't know if it can, if it's representative of the way the rest of the world is more diverse and is integrating. I mean, we're here. It's just that whether or not it's possible for diversity to be integrated into the culture of Salisbury, Maryland, to the Eastern Shore, I'm not sure. I don't see other groups as represented in the, the tradition of wildfowl carving, wildfowl hunting. So there's still that kind of image of what the Eastern Shore is. And I'm not sure if it is still what's happening, if it can coincides with reality, if it's a realistic kind of interpretation of life here now. I'm not positive, because I see lots of folks that are kind of in their own, sort of, it's almost like balkanize these different cultures within our city limits.
Because now politically, as a matter of fact, when I look at, for instance, the Salisbury City Council, it's a fairly diverse group.
It is.
As opposed to when I first got here, as an example. The county council, not so much. We may see some of that change if they do away with the at-large districts. And we had certainly a fairly progressive mayor, Jake Day, who went on to work for the Moore administration. How do you see that being reflected in our politics here? And that, there does seem to be something going on.
Well, I think things are changing. The city council is definitely diverse, and there are many voices, and I think they're doing their best to work together to reach some kind of equity. The county council, I've been to several meetings. I'm very interested in how all of this works. Seems to be more representatives of the from heres, with the exception of maybe Josh Hastings. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's fairly conservative overall. And what I've noticed in some of the meetings there is not, a little bit of resistance to change. And I've thought about this a lot, because I thought, is it trust? Have people come and taken advantage of the citizens and taken what they wanted and then left? So maybe that wariness has a lot to do, less to do with the stereotype, but more to do with the experience. I don't know. I'm a descendant from the Mayflower, and we don't have it. It's not anything to really be jumping up and down about. We really and truly were not very nice to those
To the people you met on the shore? Yes, okay.
Yeah. In Provincetown, it was like, okay, you stole that corn. That's how the first Thanksgiving started. So I'm not so sure. I think we have misplaced pride sometimes about our origins, and we have some, deep psychic wounds in this city and probably county. The lynching, is still it's contentious because it's unresolved, I think. And I don't know what it will take. I mean, my husband said everybody, every truth and reconciliation meeting we would go to, there are none of the perpetrators there, and it's not really a black problem. It isn't. It's people are trying to get to the bottom of this. They're trying to reach healing, but I think healing can only come when there's atonement. And I don't think that we are in a position, or maybe we will be. Everything could surprise me, but I don't know if we can continually do the same things.
Let me just go just reel back a little bit, because you, in these meetings that you're talking about, you were the word perpetrators. You want to clarify that?
Yeah, maybe that's okay. I just mean the people that were complicit in the commission of the lynching of these men. Where are they? And what is their connection to it? And is it possible for there to be some admission of guilt, generational guilt? Is it possible to say, yeah, we're really sorry? We're really sorry. We're sorry for the pain we caused. And there's been so much suffering. Can it not happen anymore? I mean, can we just get past that? And I think it has to do with pride. I think it has to do with ego and sense of identity and entitlement, which people can only enjoy here if they're from here, because if they go anywhere else, they're not going to be from here. So that might be the reason that they are less interested in going to other places or welcoming other people. Although my guest that is come here has found a very loving and supportive community in Salisbury. And what's fascinating to me is that younger generations, this is not even a thing. I ran into a friend, a young friend, and he had some Kamala stickers, and I said, "Whoa, does your dad know this?" And he said, "My dad's generation are dinosaurs. They're not going to be on the earth much longer." And I thought, well, that would be interesting. But if you look at human history, we're always, it's just not a good look. It's not a good predictor of what the future might be like.
You were talking, by the way, also you have a set of young poets.
Yes.
And so how do you see them differing from yourself?
Oh, my goodness. Well, for one thing, I'm so jealous because when I went to graduate school, we were terrified of our faculty, the faculty of poets, and there were important poets, published poets, and we really weren't considered real poets when we were in graduate school. And we were discouraged from publishing until we'd finished our MFA, and there was a big distance. Well, not with these students. These two students are, by the way, students of John Nieves, who teaches at the university. And he's just a terrific professor. He's accessible. He's their friend. He tells them how to publish. And also they can publish by clicking a button and submitting their poems to 40 or 50 magazines at one time, because they're submittable. You can submit simultaneously. I had to put my poems in a manila folder and mail them, and not only submit to one magazine at a time. And, you could wait 6 months, 7 months to hear. So it was slow going. They have that. They have a confidence. They've been published. They'll probably have a book out before they finish their, PhDs. And that's another thing. PhDs are required now to teach at the university. To teach poetry, because I think the field is pretty flooded with other MFA graduates. So there's that. Nobody got a PhD if you're a poet. Your work was your dissertation. So those are different, and their attitude is different.
Do they tackle subjects that perhaps may not have been tackled in the past, or do they have a different view of the world?
That's what I'm going to find out. What is their view of the world? Do they consider it incumbent upon them to be poet citizens, which I did, and I know Grace Cavalieri has felt that. It's to be an ambassador of poetry and help people understand how it can transform your worldview. And I don't know if they feel that. I don't know. And so they're really interesting to me. They're very confident and not at all intimidated by me. So
You did mention Grace Cavalieri. Tell me a little bit about her and the fact that we're going to have her.
Well, she's absolutely fabulous. She's been Poet Laureate of Maryland for quite some time now. And she does so much community work. In fact, when I was appointed Poet Laureate by Jake Day, I don't really know if he knew what to do with me, and I certainly didn't know what to do with myself either. So I called her, and I called her out of the blue. She didn't even know me. I said, I just need some advice. And she said, Nancy, you have the what you want to do, but you don't have the how. And now we have to work on that. And she's just been a real mentor for me. And she runs this wonderful program at the Library of Congress called The Poet and the Poem. And she interviews poets about their work. And I've been on her show, and it's wonderful to go there in the Library of Congress and go up to this wonderful room, not unlike this room, and read your poems and talk about your poems. And it's almost like Europe really does respect poets. I've been to several artist colonies there, and they're in French villages, and it's like, oh, the poet. I'm like, oh, believe me, not here. But anyway, it's just, she's been a big mentor for me, and it's a big deal that she's coming here. And she's 90 in her 90s, and she has 2 lovely twin daughters that travel with her. And because it's a little hard to drive, but you wouldn't believe what she's like. I mean, she moves like a 40-year-old. She thinks like a 20-year-old, and she's wonderful.
Well, give us just a sense about the kind of poetry that she wrote, and what kind of subjects did she tackle this year?
Well, she's not real provocative in the sense that I have been. With my work, not the poems that I've written for the city. They are very different from the poems that I write as Nancy Mitchell. But hers are very upbeat, I think. And because she has such she's Italian as well, and just this incredible, loving personality. So I think hers are more probably, I don't know maybe more accessible in a sense. And, she's definitely a poet of the people, so.
So where do you see the future of poetry? I mean, it's been overwhelmed by obviously other media, other forms of communication. We even have, I guess, a form of poetry, I guess, in rap, as it were, and hip hop that has its own rhythms to it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the future?
Well, I think poetry will always live because I think there is always the attempt with artists to express the inexpressible. And I think it's a human propensity to transform and translate experience into something more tangible and more succinct and concrete. So I don't worry so much about the future of poetry. I think the people that are inclined to be poets will always be poets. I don't think people read poetry, and they only read poetry that is comforting. Kind of like, oh, this is so nice. Like Mary Oliver is a very popular poet, but she's not asking really hard questions. And I'm sorry for any Mary Oliver fans out there, but it's just like provocative art. There's some people that will seek out films, art that is challenging us to change, and I don't know if it's popular. And I think poetry requires a lot of concentration, and I don't know if it's there so much anymore, but I don't know. I think poetry will always be around, like art will be around, music, dance, because the human spirit wants to express what it's like to be human. So I have a good feeling about that. That's why we have the folk festival, right? That's why we're all coming together to see how other people celebrate being human. So I think that will always bring us together. And I hope it's well attended. I mean, a lot of people I run into, I ask if they're going and they say, I have not heard about it. And I'm like, ooh, just tune in. It's so much fun and it's all free. And it's a 3-day party, it's a 3-day family reunion. And it just makes me happy to go. Do you love going?
Well, I'm working. but it is fun. And the thing about poetry, by the way, and this is my own observation, is for me, poetry is to be read aloud, not to be read.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, something you will get from what you're going to be hearing at the festival itself, that you're going to be able to hear it as opposed to necessarily have to read it.
I think you're absolutely right. During Women's History Month, we had a marvelous poet, Amanda Newell, come, and she read this terrific book, Postmortem Say, and it was about a trauma that she experienced. Her husband committed suicide. It was a dreadful thing, and she had students who were in the war in Afghanistan. It's very deep and moving work, and she also wrote about abortion, and it was packed. It was a packed reading, and it was so well received, and I was heartened to see women coming together for this reading. But I think having it read aloud, because part of the art form of poetry is how it sounds to the ear. And that's really takes a lot of concentration and talent to be able to write like that, just like with music. You know, to hear it is very different. If you read the lyrics, you'd say, wow, there's a lot of repetition here. But to hear it sung is such it's for our ears, you know, it's meant to be heard. So I think that's really an important thing. And there are a lot of readings on Zoom and a lot of poetry readings. We have a little group in Salisbury. They get together and they read poetry. I don't know if they've had formal training or even think they need formal training, but they're expressing themselves, and I think that's a great thing. We're the only town on the whole Eastern Shore that has a poet laureate. So that's kind of, we can claim that. I don't see anyone rushing to claim it, but I think there should be a flag, you know.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, I have to say, you know, the city has been really supportive of me, and you have been, and I really appreciate it. So I feel like, you know, that's how it's going to continue, is that people will have interest in it and be interested in exploring another art form that explores who we are. We're all after the same light. We're all after trying to figure out the mystery of what makes us human. And so I think it will continue.
Okay, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
Nancy Mitchell, Salisbury Poet Laureate, on the poetry that will be featured at this month's Maryland Folk Festival. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.